Hey, what's up, you amazing hackers? Hope you're all doing well today. I have the pleasure of having Simon Bennett with me today. How are you doing, my friend?
I am doing very well, thank you. And how about you?
I'm doing great, thank you. I'm glad to have you here. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, thank you for inviting me. My name is Simon Bennett, and I'm the WhatsApp founder and one of the project leads.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot for this awesome tool. And I see that you have the ZAP HUD behind you as well. One of my favorite
Yeah.
tools of all time. I really appreciate you building these tools for free. It's unbelievable. Like, can you tell us a little bit about the process of creating such a tool?
I, what you mean, the day-to-day stuff, or
Yeah,
how I started it, or what?
like the daily stuff. How much time do you spend per day on this project?
Oh, well, I'm lucky and I'm sponsored to work on ZAP full time. So it's, kind of 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
That's awesome. And can I ask you, like, were you there from the beginning, from the start?
So yeah, I mean, I released SAP in 2010. At that time, I was working for a financial company, so it was very much a side project. It was only when I moved to Mozilla that I was able to spend more of my time on ZAP. I could then spend so Mozilla sponsored me for about 8 years, I think it was, and I could spend between 40 and 80% of my time on ZAP, but I'm now pretty much 100%.
That's awesome. And of course, we all know that people compare Zap with Burp Suite often. I tell them that that's like comparing apples to pears. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences?
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of similarities, but there are differences as well. And I'm certainly not going to criticize Burp. It's a great tool. The company behind it and the people behind it are amazing. So, I mean, for me, the biggest difference is the fact that Zap is completely free and open source, whereas Burp is commercial and closed source. So, Zap is we're very community focused. So, we want people to get involved. Hundreds of people have got involved to date. We want more people to get involved. So if you want to get involved, just let us know. Um, and I think there are, each tool has its own strengths and weaknesses. And I think, we have a certain focus within ZAP. So automation is one of our big focuses. Scripting as well. I think ZAP's scripting and automation capabilities are probably the best in the industry, including all the commercial tools, whether it's Burp or any others. Um, so, but I think some people find it tricky migrating between the two. So if you're used to Burp and you try using Zap, it works in a different way. And we've heard from people who use Zap a lot and then try and use Burp. It works in a different way. So you have to have a bit of a different mindset. That's not to say one tool has a better approach than the other. Uh, these are security tools. They're not doing intuitive things. They're doing weird shit. So how we express that and how we help you do the weird shit, we do it in different ways, and that's why people kind of struggle to move between them sometimes. Once you get used to both of them, then you can understand the strengths and weaknesses and use them appropriately.
Definitely, and I also think, of course, that a lot of it comes down to understanding of the things that are happening on screen as well. Like you guys have very context-dependent screens I've seen, whereas
Yeah.
Burp Suite always has everything open. So that's also a difference that I enjoy at least. There's much more, of course, like the Zap HUD behind you. That is also a big, great thing that I enjoy. And of course, it's free, but like people often compare the two and they say, yes, this tool does this and this tool does that. Why is it so much better? Well, it finds different things. That's first of all, and I'm talking about the scanner, of course, the
Yeah.
automated scanner. It finds different things, but Burp is a program with a huge team behind it that they
Yeah.
spend full time every single day. A huge team on working on Burp Suite, well, we have ZAP with such a relatively small team bringing us such a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, I'll put the contact information in the description if anybody wants to contact Simon to help. That way, that's certainly possible. Could you tell me a little bit about how the idea came to life for OWASP ZAP?
Sure. So I was a Java developer. I was a kind of team lead developer, and the company I was working at, this financial company, I was developing an online service. It was kind of security critical, so we planned all the security beforehand as we were developing the service. And I got the pen testers in a couple of weeks before it was going to go live, and they were, the whole idea was they would come in, say we'd done a good job, and that would be great. It didn't turn out that way. Got them in, put them in a room, explained everything they needed to know about the system, came back an hour later just to see if I could help them out at all, anything they didn't understand, only to find one of them was logged into the admin console with my credentials. They'd gained admin access within an hour. In this case, it wasn't actually a vulnerability in the service I developed. They'd cracked the single sign-on system for the entire company in 1 hour. That kind of set the tone for the week. They found a load of vulnerabilities I've never even heard of, and it was a car crash as far as I was concerned. I've actually since delivered worse pen test reports to other teams and companies, but at the time it felt awful. So I just thought, okay, I thought I was a pretty good developer. I know how to build reliable, performant, usable services, but I clearly don't know how to build secure ones. So I need to learn. That was my whole aim. I wanted to learn how to make my software more secure. So I thought, okay, I will learn about security. Found out about OWASP, started reading about the OWASP top 10. But I learn best by doing things. So I started downloading tools, playing around with them. And I thought, okay, I'll find a web security tool. I'll scan my programs every night. Won't get embarrassed by the pen testers again. And I was looking for a side project. I've always had side projects. I was looking for something new. I thought maybe open source security project I could get involved in. That would help me learn. At that time, so this is 2009, there were no maintained open source web security tools, none. That kind of surprised me, and I thought that was wrong. But I started playing around, and so OWASP had Web Scarab, but I didn't really get on with that. But there was a tool that they abandoned called Proxy. That was quite fun. I kind of started playing around with that. It didn't have any automation. It was quite limited, but I could understand what was going on. I started learning more about security. And I found out that there were a few things that annoyed me. And I thought, well, it's a Java program. I'm a Java developer. I'll pull it into Eclipse. Did that, and I can still remember the first change I made, which was it was either in the sites tree or the history panel. You could right click and you could then do a manual request, but you could only do it on one of them and not the other. So my very first change was copying that menu to the other tab. And it worked. And it's like, oh, this is fun. I could make something of this. So that's how it got started, really. It was really very much a case of me wanting to learn about security.
That's awesome. Like the fact that you took an open source project, you did something on it, and you immediately felt that bug. Well, I feel the same way whenever I program. So anybody who has any Java experience, feel free to just have a look at the repository. It's open source after all. And that's what I like about OWASP as well. They are very open source. They are made to be the industry standard a little bit. But just so the viewers know, OWASP Top 10 was never meant to be a comprehensive pen testing tool, more a overview of the top 10 vulnerabilities. I think people confuse that a lot.
Yeah.
So if I start OWASP ZAP and automated scan, does it cover that OWASP Top 10 for me?
So we've got a page on the website that goes through this. If you see a tool that says they test all of the OWASP top 10, I would be very skeptical. You can automate a certain amount of things, but the best pen testing will be done with a person, a skilled professional, using a tool like ZAP or Burp. There's only a limited amount you can. There's certain things automated tools do very well at, and there's certain things they do badly. So if you're trying to find complex vulnerabilities in authentication mechanisms, I haven't seen any tool do that effectively. So ZAP will find a lot of vulnerabilities that are related to the OWASP top 10. We have tags associated with alerts, and on our website you can actually find out which alerts are associated with which top 10 items over the years as well, because the top 10 changes. So ZAP will definitely find vulnerabilities that are related to the top 10, but I don't think any tool should really claim to be able to find all of the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities in an automated way.
Exactly. Like even just logging monitoring and alerting, you can't really test for that. Like
Exactly.
yeah, and like I've seen the same. Some tools claim that they will cover the entire OWASP top 10. That's nearly impossible, with business logic alone being one that's impossible to teach a computer. I saw that you guys do have a great authentication module. Were you involved in the development of the authentication?
I've been involved in most of the ZAP development. I've done quite a bit on the authentication, definitely not all of it. And authentication is one of these areas which is difficult for automated tools. Um, and I think ZAP can cope with pretty much everything, but it might be painful. So there are certain simple cases we can handle pretty much out of the box. But as soon as you get into things like single sign-on, it gets very difficult. I'm actually trying to talk to single sign-on vendors, because we know this is a problem across the industry. Burp has the same problem. There's no magic that tools like ZAP and Burp do, although sometimes it might seem like it to the outside. But we need to make it easier as an industry for automated tools to authenticate to services, and not just APIs. Generally, APIs are easier, but we have to be able to connect to the web interfaces, because there's certain vulnerabilities like DOM-XSS that you can only discover in the web interface. And if you've got some complex single sign-on authentication mechanism, we can launch browsers and click on things, but it's pretty fragile. So what I'm trying to do is talk to the single sign-on vendors and come up with either different solutions for all of them, but ideally a solution across the industry where we can make this a lot easier, because it's causing pain for people who are scanning their websites. And in the end, there's a chance that SSO will make applications less secure. And that's because if it's too painful to automate tools like ZAP and Burp against the application, then those tools won't be used. And that means even though your sign-on is very well protected, the rest of the application isn't tested anywhere near as well as it should be.
Exactly, and one way I used to get around that right now is just to sign on, take the authorization headers, and work that way. So if you guys are stuck, that's a way to get around that. But like Simon said, it's something that we should really standardize across the industry and find a way to get around this, because it's not as secure. And my way isn't even automated fully, because you have to log on manually still every single time. Plus, single sign-on usually means that you don't have many accounts that you can test with, which is also a problem. You usually only have one account. Anyway, enough about that, sorry. Really good work on that, because that authentication module can be used to test for broken access control with ZAP. I don't know if it's a plugin or standard, but that auth matrix is a great tool.
That came about, so that I think it's a Google Summer of Code project. We've had some great Google Summer of Code students work on ZAP, and that was actually because I was originally, when the company where I developed started on ZAP. My second service after I started ZAP was had a very complex authentication. Well, the authentication was straightforward because it's single sign-on, but the access control, there was horizontal and vertical access control, and the matrix was horrific. And I implemented that, and I manually tested it before the second load of pen testers looked at it. And manually testing it was a complete pain. And I thought, okay, I'm working on this Paros, which became ZAP by that stage. And I thought, we could automate that, but the trouble was we needed ZAP to be able to explore the application effectively, which it couldn't do at that time, and then it needed to have an understanding of authentication, session handling, and the idea of different users. And at the time, it just wasn't possible. But we had a Google Summer of Code student. I think the first thing they worked on was the Spider, so they completely revamped the Spider so we could explore applications more effectively. They revamped the session handling, and then they worked on the access control. So what we can now do is with this access control add-on, you can actually give different. If you teach ZAP how to authenticate and give different credentials, then ZAP will try and explore your application with the different sets of credentials, and then we'll try and look at what one can do and what the other can do, and we'll try and do the things that the one user apparently can't do. So it's a lot more effective and much quicker than doing that stuff manually.
Yeah, definitely. I can see potential there to put it in a CI/CD pipeline. So my question was, is there any way that we can export these results automatically so we can just read them out from a tool or from a report?
That's a good question. I can't remember whether the access control add-on has API support. I mean, the thing is, it will raise alerts, and those alerts will be in the report. So yeah, you will be able to do that. I can't remember how effective the API is. That was one of the very early modules, the add-ons that was created, and we probably didn't have the API at that stage. I can't remember offhand if we've added the API since.
Maybe for the viewers at home, a little bit of information as well. If you start up ZAP, you're basically starting up a server with a database, and everything gets written into your database as a session. So you can make API calls as well to a lot of the application, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the whole idea, obviously ZAP is open source, but we treat the data, it's your data. So we try to make sure it's as accessible as possible. So we have our API I think, is best in the industry. You can't do absolutely everything, but you can do nearly everything with the API. The few things you can't, we're working on those. But we also try and make sure you can access everything programmatically as well. And we have insane scripting support. So there are lots of different types of ZAP scripts, and these basically give you complete control. You have access to all the data structures, all the classes, everything that's running. And these scripts run in ZAP, and you can create them in ZAP as well. So ZAP has a script console where you can create the scripts and you can try them out, and they work in automation. And you can actually add things to the UI. You can add new API endpoints if you want. You can essentially reprogram ZAP on the fly, which I think is pretty unique in the industry.
Definitely. Yeah, that's something that, of course, with Burp Suite, you can create your own plugins as well. But I find it's a lot more difficult with ZAP. There's direct access to that scripting engine.
Yeah.
What scripting language do you guys use?
So we try and support lots of languages. So we have JavaScript is built in. We also have a language called Zest. So that's actually a graphical language. So you create it in the ZAP desktop, and it's basically it's a hierarchy. It's a bit like it's a macro type language, but I said it's graphical, and it's focused very much on making requests, analyzing responses, extracting things. It's got loops. It's got loads of different things. And the advantage, because it's graphical, you don't have to worry about the syntax. You don't have to remember weird syntaxes. If you can create a Zest script in ZAP using the GUI, then it'll run. There's no syntax errors there. So that's a very powerful option, which we probably haven't documented well enough, but some people absolutely love it. But we also support Python, Ruby, Groovy. There's a whole set of different scripting languages. I've probably forgotten some. So just go to the ZAP marketplace and search for script, and you'll see a whole load of them.
That's groovy, baby. Your ZAP marketplace is full of plugins as well. Are they programmed by the creators of ZAP themselves, and are they community?
A mixture of both. So some are created by the ZAP core team, some have been created by Google Summer of Code students. I think we've got some commercial ones in there or third-party ones. So yeah, as long as it's open source and not doing something malicious, then it can go onto the ZAP marketplace.
That's awesome. So you said a bit about the core team. Can you tell me a little bit about what they consist of? How many guys do you have, or gals, of course?
Sure. So there's four of us in the core team right now. Obviously myself, and then a guy called Ricardo, whose username online is THC202. You will not get an interview with him, I'm afraid. He's very private, but he's been working on ZAP since 2011. Absolutely great guy. And I mean, he's spending pretty much all of his time working on ZAP. I'm not quite sure how he does it, but we've managed to get some funding for him to work on the networking layer right now. So he's incredibly helpful. And I usually say if Ricardo says ZAP works in one way and I say it works in another way, then he's probably right. I think he's actually made more contributions to ZAP than I have. Not by much, but yeah, he's ahead of me. Then we have Rick King Thorin, and he's been, I can't remember, it's like 2013 or 14, something like that, so he's been with us a long time. He works on ZAP in his own time. And then we've got Akshat, who was a Google Summer of Code student. So he's been working for a company over the summer that uses ZAP, but I think he's back at college now. So there's no restrictions on who can get into the ZAP core team. You've just got to make enough contributions. And we've had other students there before. We've had some pen testers before. It changes over time. But myself, Ricardo, and Rick have been there for quite a while, and we're the project leads as far as OWASP is concerned.
And if you guys don't want to contribute programmatically, you can always support the program as well, of course, on GitHub.
Absolutely. I mean, programming is only one aspect of ZAP development or developing any open source tool. Documentation is absolutely key, testing. So we've got a contributing guide on the ZAP website, and it goes through all different things you can do, and coding's an important one, but it's only one aspect. So if you want to get involved, we want to help you to help us make ZAP better.
I really, really appreciate that you guys are so open and so easy to reach about that. Because again, ZAP is an amazing tool, and I always tell people, if you're not using ZAP, you're doing it wrong. Why do I tell that? Because I think you should use all the available tools you have, and they fill each other in. All of them have holes, all of them have weaknesses. Can you tell me a little bit about what you think the biggest weakness is right now of ZAP?
Good question. I think handling modern web applications, we can do a fairly good job, but I mean, this isn't just a problem with ZAP. I think it's across the industry. So I think modern web applications, the industry is struggling with, and different tools are doing a better or less well job. ZAP is fairly effective at exploring them with the Ajax spider. So we launch browsers and click on things. We do DOM XSS testing, but we don't have a good enough understanding of modern web applications at the moment. However, I'm working on that. So we've got an add-on which is not available yet, but that is something which is a focus. Other than that, I think, again, authentication. And that, again, it's an industry problem. I think some tools have better out-of-the-box integrations than we do, and it's something we need to work on. So that's another one. And the trouble is, I don't think any tools are really effective in scanning web applications right now. So ZAP could do better with everything, and most of the industry could as well. Well, all of the industry could. Scan rules, we need better scan rules. But one of the problems we have is, because we're an open source project, we don't have that library of thousands of real world web applications. So we know our users test against thousands, hundreds of thousands of real world apps, but they don't tend to tell us, give us details of those and tell us where we're not finding things, finding false positives, false negatives. We need more feedback, and we kind of need more good examples of things that ZAP does badly. False positives and false negatives. If you can give us an example a simple example we can reproduce, then we can fix these problems. But if you don't tell us about them, then what can we do?
Exactly. Yeah, that's why if you guys have any labs, vulnerable labs that you created, scan them with ZAP. ZAP doesn't find something, you can always report it, especially if it's reproducible. That's something that the team is always looking out for.
Absolutely.
So that was one of the biggest weaknesses, but of course, ZAP has a lot of strengths as well. What do you think is the biggest positive of
Well, I think our scripting support, that is so powerful. The API, so scripting and API, I think we're industry leaders there, and that's across all the commercial tools as well. And the HUD, the HUD is completely unique. I've not seen anything like it. So those are the things that come to mind immediately.
That's a good one. Yeah, like the ZAP HUD is one of my favorite. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, the ZAP HUD is one of my favorite things as well, and like the scripting engine, super powerful. Let's see, we have some questions from the audience as well. John McCoy asks, what feature would you prioritize if you turn to a hacker tool? What features would you add to make ZAP super lethal?
Well, it is a hacker tool, really. It's just not malicious. We try and find vulnerabilities. We don't try and abuse them, and that's very much our focus. We're trying to make the internet safer. We're trying to make the world a better place. So we're trying to find vulnerabilities and not exploit them. So that is very much the focus. And when I started ZAP, I was a bit nervous. It's like, what would happen? How would I feel if I found out that ZAP was being used for bad things more than good things? And I kind of thought, well, if it ended up being a tool that was used by malicious reasons more than good reasons, well, I'd probably stop developing it. That's not what I want. But as far as I can tell, it's used way more to find and then fix vulnerabilities than it is for bad purposes.
Of course, and yeah, if somebody really wants to do bad things, they're gonna learn it anyway, whether it's through ZAP or another means, they will find it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have the same with teaching, of course. I'm teaching people.
Yeah.
Am I teaching them the right stuff? Am I teaching them to be ethical? Somebody asks, how is it going on your end?
It's going pretty well, actually. I'd had a bit of a hiccup a while ago when I lost my last job, but I have a new job. I can't tell you about it right now because we haven't announced it, but that is how I'm able to spend all my time working on ZAP now. So things are going very well, thank you.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
One thing I would also give to all the people that everybody always tells me, the ZAP UI is difficult to understand. If you have examples, but concrete examples, we would love to hear about them, because I always hear people tell me it's difficult to use, but they never tell me exactly how it is difficult to use.
We get the same thing, and I think it is people who use Burp and then try and use ZAP, and ZAP works in a different way. And as I said before, if you're used to Burp and you start using ZAP, it'll be confusing. But if you're used to ZAP and you start using Burp, it'll be confusing. There are different principles. I'm not even sure I could articulate what they are. You've already mentioned one thing, the context-sensitive thing. So ZAP has so many options, and if you start ZAP now, you might think there's a lot there. But there's so much more which we've hidden because it's just too it was getting too complicated. So there are a whole load of tabs that there's a button which will show them all if you want, but usually they will disappear. So if you start the ZAP Spider, then Spider tab will appear. If WebSocket messages start getting used, then the WebSocket tab will appear. And if you right-click anywhere, there's a whole load of context-sensitive options. So I think the ZAP UI is logical and sensible, but you have to think in a certain way. If you don't understand it, then you haven't understood ZAP yet. We've got loads of videos explaining how to use it, so go and have a look at those. But if you've got concrete, we know ZAP could always be better. Every so often someone will say, ZAP isn't, could be better because of this, this, and this. And we go, That's a good point. Someone reported one recently and immediately offered to help. It's like, great, you're assigned the issue. But even if you're not a programmer, just let us know examples of how we could make the ZAP user interface easier to use, and we'll make it happen. That's what we're aiming for. But yeah, you have to, just saying it's hard doesn't help anyone.
Exactly. And just so everybody knows, in scope, out of scope, you set it on the context top left window. A lot of people seem to forget about that or have trouble finding that. And also make sure that you put ZAP in the correct mode, of course, because ZAP has different modes. Can you tell us a bit more about those modes, please?
Sure. So I, I must admit I don't use the ZAP modes very much. I just use the full on the you can do anything you like mode. So we have a safe mode, and in the safe mode, ZAP won't let you do anything bad. Why would you use that? Well, you might actually be wanting to test a production site, and you want to see the requests and responses that are going on, and you just want to make really sure that you don't actually start attacking anything. So put it in safe mode, and you'll be absolutely fine. Then we have protected mode. And protected mode is same as safe mode. It won't let you do anything nasty until you define a context. And as you were saying, context can be in or out of scope. So as soon as you define something that's in a context and is in scope, then you'll be able to attack that. But you'll only be able to attack the things that are in scope and not anything that's out of scope. So that's protected mode. Then we have the standard full mode where you can attack anything, which is, I must admit, how I tend to use that. And then we have attack mode. And attack mode is a little bit different because it's actually the same as protected mode. You can't do anything bad unless something's in scope. But as soon as something's in scope, then ZAP will start active scanning it. So normally what you do is we recommend you explore your application, and that could be manually, it could be via one of the spiders, the standard spider, the Ajax spider, importing API definitions, all these things, proxying unit tests, and then you perform the active scanning. When you're importing things or exploring the application, the passive scanning will just happen in the background. ZAP will do that anyway. The active scanning you have to tell ZAP to do because you're attacking things. That's when you're doing the throwing bad things at your target applications. But normally you start the active scanner, it'll run, and then it finishes. Attack mode is different because as soon as you put something in scope, then ZAP will start attacking it. And what you can do is you can use this as a way of when you're manually testing an application. So say you've got a very large application and you don't want to explore all of it because the active scan could take hours or whatever, maybe days, but you want to focus on one particular aspect of it, maybe the basket or the login sequence or whatever that. You proxy your browser through ZAP. You can launch browsers from ZAP, just do that. And then as you explore the application, ZAP will start attacking the URLs that are in scope. So that's kind of, as a manual testing option, it's a nice way of directing ZAP to attack whatever you want.
Definitely, that's awesome. That's also one of the big differences, of course. Burp Suite doesn't have that. And just so you guys know at home, learn to use all of the different proxies, not just ZAP, not just Burp.
Definitely.
Include Charles proxy, include everything that you can, because there are uses for each and every single one of those. Like for example, mobile, I assume mobile can also be tested with ZAP, right?
Yes, I mean, I completely agree with you. I think monoculture is bad. I wouldn't want ZAP to be the only security web testing tool. That would be a bad thing. So you should try all of the tools that are out there. How can you claim to be, proficient in your profession if you don't know how all the main tools work? That just doesn't make sense to me. Apparently, you can use that for mobile testing. That's not something I've ever needed to do, but we've got some stuff on the website. There's some videos for people explaining how to do it. But yeah, not my area of expertise. But yes, it's definitely possible.
That's awesome. basically, I always say these things are always just proxies. So if you manage to get your certificate in between and you manage to get the proxy set to your computer, then you're golden because you can read the data from the request, of course.
Exactly.
Can I just maybe a few more questions?
Sure.
Somebody asked for setting up a cheat sheet for hotkeys, just so everybody knows that's available. So I'll put a link of that in the description.
Yeah, so but basically in our options, so the hotkeys, we have ones out of the box, but you can change them. So anything which you can assign a hotkey to, you can change. So there is a kind of out of the box cheat sheet, but because you can change them yourselves, you can generate a cheat sheet from within in ZAP. So it's not the prettiest thing, but if anyone wants to improve it, then improve it and contribute those changes back.
All these changes sound so simple. It's like, oh, we have this small thing, but in reality, I imagine it's quite complicated to implement all of this.
I mean, it's people suggest something and go, yeah, that would be great, but it's a lot of effort. And often I'll come up with ideas and think, oh, this will be simple, and then I try it and realize, oh no, then I've got to change this, and then oh my god, this is a rabbit hole. But sometimes that's what you got to do. I mean, ZAP is a big, complex project, and there are, you know, if you make a change, particularly deep down in the code, you've got to be careful because it can break a lot of things. But luckily, we've got a growing number of unit tests now, which help us keep ZAP as stable as possible.
Speaking of that, how do you guys handle technical debt?
Good question. I mean, the original Paris proxy was a UI only tool. It didn't have an API. You couldn't run it. You could only run it in UI mode. It didn't have any unit tests at all. And for a while, we carried on like that, and we added kind of daemon mode and command mode. And after a while, we found that things were breaking and it was getting harder and harder to maintain. So the core teams got together and we decided we had to have more unit tests. We started some, but we put a lot more effort in. And now we kind of insist on unit tests wherever possible. It's not so easy in the UI. But we have, the other thing is we have reviews. So any changes that are made have to be passed by two of the core team. That includes me. So if I submit a change, I cannot merge anything until two of the other core team have approved it. And Ricardo, particularly THC202, does incredible reviews, really in depth. You submit your first pull request to ZAP, you'll get a lot of comments, but they're all really good, particularly from Ricardo. So we know there are things we need to improve. One of the things we've been doing is we've been trying to migrate code from the core. So ZAP it doesn't have one repository, GitHub repository. I think it's about 35 or 36 repositories now. There's a lot. But we have two main ones, one for what we call the core, and one, so that's ZAP Proxy, and then ZAP extensions. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to move code from the core into ZAP extensions. And the reason we do that is because if we make a core change, we can only get that out to people as a stable release. It's like once or twice a year, whereas ZAP extensions, that's where the add-ons live, and we can push changes out to those at any point because they're in the marketplace. So even something as fundamental as the ZAP Spider, the traditional Spider, that was in the core until very recently, and Rick and some of the other team have been working hard on that, and that is now an extension. So that is an add-on on the marketplace. If you've got a stable release of ZAP, you won't be able to use it as the marketplace version until we release a new version, new stable version. So the next stable version, the Spider will be in the marketplace, and that means any changes we make, we can push out. So we've had cases where people have reported problems to us, we fix them, and within an hour, there's a new add-on out there. And if it's in the core, then then the live Docker release will be updated within a day now, but we can do that more quickly as well. So yeah, we're trying to migrate code, and as we migrate it, we're adding tests. And we know there's a whole range of things like the database support. We need to actually put a much better database layer in. That's something that we've just got a million things to do. Some of them are brand new features, but a lot of them are improving existing things or fixing technical debt.
And with all of this in mind, do you guys have any plans to make ZAP paid in the future?
No. So ZAP is open source and will stay open source. I strongly believe that the industry needs an open source web security tool like ZAP. And we don't get as much, we won't get as much funding, we don't get as many people working on it as the commercial tools, but ZAP makes the online world a better place. It means that individuals and companies that can't afford the commercial tools have a really professional tool they can use. And it means the commercial tools have to get better. If commercial tools aren't providing enough value over ZAP, then they're not going to be able to make money. So they've got to invest. And a lot of tools, commercial tools, haven't been investing enough in recent years. And they're having problems, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. That open source thing is something that I strongly stand behind as well. I really appreciate the fact that everybody can just use it and play around with it. Even if you're completely new, you can just download it. Of course, run it on hackspert.com or something. Don't go run it in the wild if you don't have permission. Everybody,
Exactly.
you have permission to hack hackspert.com, the entire website if you want. But another question we have is, how can a noob contribute? Well, we already went a little bit over that, so I'll definitely put those things in the description below, how you can contribute. And one is, I would like to ask, how long did it take to make the first version which went live? Also, I love how so many small things are configurable. What was the idea of making almost everything configurable from the start, or something which happened along the way? Did you implement that later?
Okay, so the first version. So I started playing around with Proxy in 2009. And initially it was just to help myself learn. And then I, I decided that as part of my learning, I was going to start telling people about the OWASP top 10. So developers and functional testers where I worked, I just started giving OWASP top 10 talks explaining what the vulnerabilities were, how they could be abused, and just helping people out, because I didn't know this stuff, the people I worked with didn't know this stuff. And the first question everyone asked every time was, what tools should we use? So okay, I'm going to have a look at this properly. I went back and I reviewed all the available tools. And at the time, I didn't feel I could go to the business and say, right, thousands of developers, we need an expensive tool for every single developer. I didn't feel I could do that. And so I wanted it to be free. I wanted it to be open source. I wanted it to be cross-platform, because I think pretty much all the developers, they used Windows. I used Linux, just to be because I like Linux. And so cross-platform. It didn't have to be super powerful, but it had to be effective. And there was nothing out there. Well, there was still Paros, or actually I realized the best option was the version of Paros I was hacking around with. So at that point, I decided, okay, I will fork Paros, I'll create ZAP, and I'll release it. But I didn't want to just release Paros as it was rebranded. I wanted to make sure it had some extra features. So I did help. There was a one-page help thing before, which wasn't very effective. So I did a lot of help. And I added a few new features. And it was 2010, so it was probably wasn't 12 months, it was well over 6 months. And then I noticed that somebody else forked Paros. And I couldn't believe it was like a month before I was going to release it. And a guy called Axel Newman created something called Andy Paros. And I thought, that's it, there's no point in me carrying on. And I nearly stopped there. But then I looked at it, and Axel was really focusing his fork as a pen test tool. And initially, ZAP was very much focused on developers. So I wanted to market it as the security tool for developers. So I thought about it and thought, well, we're going in different directions. I will release ZAP anyway. And so I put ZAP on. I think it was SourceForge where it started, and Axel actually noticed it and got in touch. So actually, all of this we've got the initial history of ZAP is all on the website, and actually links to the original messages that Axel sent. But yeah, so he and eventually I managed to get him involved in ZAP. So he was the first contributor after myself. But I released ZAP in I think it was September 2010. So it was well over 6 months, maybe, but probably less than 12 months between starting hacking on Paris and releasing the first version of ZAP.
It's great that you push through because thanks to that we do have this amazing tool at our disposal, and that can be a lesson to anybody at home. If you feel like quitting, if you feel like giving up, you never know how close you are to the goal. So keep digging.
Exactly. Oh, I didn't answer the question about configurability.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that seemed important from an early stage. So the one thing about security tools is, I mean, in the normal case, you think the edge cases are like 5%. In security, edge cases are like 95%. They're the only things we are concerned with most of the time. So there's so many ways people develop web applications. It's insane. There are so many different options, and so you have a choice of your security tool either hides complexity from users and tries to kind of do the best it can, or it exposes that complexity and allows the user to choose. Because of the open source background and the idea is we want to expose things. We want to help you understand how things work. If we hide things from you, it doesn't help you. So we try and expose everything. And if there are different ways of doing things, we make those options. Because then it's up to you to choose. And the options might be overwhelming, particularly in new security. So we try to have sensible defaults. But in the end, as you learn more, you will appreciate the options and you'll start to understand why these things are optional and why we can't just go, this is the best way of doing things and we'll only allow you to do it that way. We try and make ZAP as flexible so different people can use it in different ways. And we know ZAP is used from everyone, for people completely new to web security, right up to the hardcore pen testers. So we've got to cope with the whole range of users and people using ZAP in very different ways. So that's why ZAP has got so many options, and we will carry on adding more and more options.
Definitely, yeah, that's a big one for me as well, having all those options available. Because like you said, I come across complex web applications from time to time, very complex ones, where the default authentication might not work, or it's not or it might be an own implementation of that. It's really important that I have those options available to me. As a beginner, how would you go about this? Do you have any tips for somebody who's just starting out?
I play around with things. I mean, it depends how. It's good to understand how you learn best. Some people learn well in a classroom environment. Some people learn well by reading things. Some people by watching videos. I learn best by trying things out. So, you know, using ZAP on deliberately vulnerable applications, that's how I learned. I played around with Paros. I was just trying things out. I tried to create my own vulnerable web applications. There's an old project now called the Budget Store, which I use for some training things, and it's actually fun trying to create vulnerabilities. And I don't think I really understood cross-site scripting until I tried to improve the ZAP's cross-site scripting rule. At that point, it was like, okay, how does this work? What are all the possibilities? What should ZAP be doing? If you can't automate something unless you can do it manually. So that's one reason why I think the manual thing is so important. We try and automate everything we can in ZAP, but there are always cases where you'll be more effective manually. So understand how well you learn best, but in the end, playing around with things I think is the best option.
Yeah, and I always treat my tools like I have a second pen tester with me. That's a little bit dumb. That might report some false positives sometimes, but that's up to me to check what he's reporting, of course. Like, he's my junior. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, pen test tools like ZAP, they're there to help. They're not to replace you. We're not going to get rid of pen testers. All with automated tools like ZAP will find the low-hanging fruit. And that can be great when you're developing stuff because you can fix things early and you can kind of identify problems in training or libraries. If you're getting cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, well, you're not checking your input and encoding your output properly. So you can identify things and then develop. You can give people training. You can make sure you're using the right libraries. But as a pen tester, ZAP is there to tell you things, and it's there to help you. It's not going to replace you. It's trying to make your job easier. You can do all this stuff using a browser, but it'll take you a lot longer. So ZAP is there to help.
Definitely, yeah, and ZAP can cover a huge attack surface in a lot shorter time than we can, of course. That's also a big advantage. For me, I would like to thank you very much for coming, and I would like to ask, do you have any final words for our audience?
I have fun. This is a great industry to be in. It's a great time we can get paid to do some really fun things. And if you'd like to get involved with ZAP, get in touch with me. There's always a million things to do. If we had enough people, we would do so much more. And we know that, we've had students with very little experience create some great features for ZAP. We've had security people learn programming from ZAP. Rick, one of the core team, learned to program Java by working on ZAP. And we've had developers who've learned security by contributing to ZAP. So please get in touch. There's always a million things to do.
Definitely, I'll put the details in the description below because I think it's important that this tool gets developed further. And Rick, will have to get him on sometime as well. It was awesome having you. Thank you so much, Simon. I really appreciate your time and also appreciate the time you put into ZAP, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your support. You're one of our key supporters, and that's really appreciated.
My pleasure. If anybody wants to learn more about ZAP, I have a free ZAP course as well. I'll put that link in the description. I'm gonna expand it. I know it's a little bit basic now still, but I'm not aiming at the advanced people. I'm aiming at the beginners to get them into ZAP, and from there you can learn it yourself a little bit more. That's kind of the idea behind that. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, amazing hackers.
Bye.